I was talking to some friends over the weekend, and these folks were raised in church. And one thing that came up in particular was there are a lot of men's groups or men's Bible studies in churches where men gather together weekly or something like that. And one of the friends was raising the fact that a lot of times those men's groups don't go beyond just guys confessing sin. And a lot of the conversation ends up being about sexual sin. I lusted, I was looking at this woman, I cheated on my wife, my girlfriend, I watched porn, I masturbated. Just becomes a cycle of just this the same thing. And the friend was kind of complaining about how there wasn't much resolution as it relates to those things. It was just kind of a confession. And one thing that I was reminded of is oftentimes in some Christian circles, the solution for those things that is offered is First Corinthians 7, verse 9, which says, "But if they cannot exercise self control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion." Now, a lot of times they skip over the verse before that that says, "To the unmarried and the widows, I say that it's good for them to remain single as I am." But we'll discuss that later. But I think about how that second verse, verse 9, is saying it's better to marry if you can't exercise self control, better to marry than to burn with lust. And I think about the implications that that has for a lot of women. I think the assumption ends up being that if you have all these sexual desires, if you get married, your wife will fulfill them and then you'll be good. You won't have to sin anymore. But I can tell you from counseling multiple couples and being in church spaces and Christian spaces, that's not typically how that plays out. And it's not safe to assume that. And women end up being the liability because they marry a man who has addictions, a lack of self control in this area. And in many cases, he ends up cheating with, let's just say, the porn or another person or in some other way. So I'm not necessarily trying to offer a solution here, but I want to raise the question and have you share it with the Christians, pastors, ministers, or whoever in your circle. Is this verse being applied correctly? And have we considered the implications for the women that marry these men if the solution is just, if you got lust, if you got sexual issues, just get married? Have we thought through this? Is this beneficial? And what do you think are some better ways to deal with that?
We ain't going out like that. We ain't going out like that. Watch me go.